Welcome back. I'm Michael Storm, the anarchist of comic books and co-owner of Amazing Fantasies comic book shop here in Topeka, Kansas. Wherever you're finding the show today, do me a favor, click, tap, or smash that like button. Get out your turbo blaster and nail that thing, whatever it is you have to do to get it to pay attention to you, to let us know that you're out there. It's one of the biggest things that you can do to let people know that we're here and we're doing what's right. We're doing what's right by comic books and comic book creators and the future of reading and the future of creativity. That's the way we see it here at Amazing Fantasies, because it's true. It really is. So I'm doing some comic book reviews and having some fun. It's been a while since I really sat down and did a number of them, and I'm trying to get back in the flow of doing it and producing some regular things just to let you know what's going on out there in the world of comic books and what you can expect to read, and maybe not necessarily the things that everybody else is reading. That's one of the ideas behind it, is to not only just for myself to be out there reading some more comic books, but to be reading some things that I can tell somebody about that they've never heard about before. Everybody's heard about Batman. Everybody's heard about Absolute Batman and Absolute Universe this and Ultimate Universe that, and everybody's heard about these things. They're the talk of the town. What about some of these other books? What about some of the independent books? Well, that's in there. That's part of the reason that I do it. And so I get to bring you one of these books this time, except that it's fun because there's, you know how the social media is, you know how our world is today. If you go looking for things, or if you're in the right places, you're going to find people talking about things in a certain way. And anytime there's a comic book that somebody mentions, particularly if it's an independent one, that before it comes to print and there's any hype about it at all, people start talking about FOMO and then fear of missing out, and how that offsets and messes with the values of comic books, particularly in the secondary market. And so I thought it would be fun, because I don't necessarily pay any attention to these things. I just read what I find to be interesting. But I thought it would be fun to pick one of these books in particular that there's been some talk about. I could have done it. I could have done it with White Sky. I could have done it with Dork. There's any number of these other books here recently. What was the Butterfly one? All of these books here recently over the last couple of months, I could have done it with any one of these. But I finally decided, all right, let's go ahead and do it. Let's find one of these FOMO books and see if it's as interesting as people are talking about. So there's a lot of talk about Royals. And this is a new book from Image. It's written by Derek Kirk Kim and drawn by Jacob Perez. And it just looked interesting. It looked not only is it, you know, sort of culturally different than the average American comic book, because it's in Seoul, Korea. That's where the majority of the book takes place, and maybe all of it. I don't know. We won't know until they go through the storyline. They've only released the first one so far, and technically they haven't released it yet because it doesn't come out for another 2 days. I get to read mine in advance. That's one of the better parts of being able to do this. I do get to see a bunch of this stuff before other people, and I get to enjoy it, you know, just that a couple of days sooner than other people. But this story, this Royals story, it looked interesting. It's got a couple of young men, a couple of brothers who are visiting the motherland, Seoul, South Korea, for the first time. And I guess they're either British citizens or American citizens. I don't think that they pointed that out. If they did, I missed it, and I'm not one to do that. And I'll tell you how I know this to be a fact. I don't necessarily miss those things. I do miss things a lot. I remember talking about it was an Absolute Batman. Speaking of Absolute Batman, just here back a few weeks ago, when the Joker finally made, or no, sorry, I'm thinking of the regular Matt Fraction, Jorge Jimenez Batman. Sorry, not the Absolute Batman. I said Absolute Batman. Batman before, and that's what sent me down that road. And they also have introduced Joker here recently too. But in the regular series Batman, the Matt Fraction, Jorge Jimenez Batman series, they introduced the Joker in there, and they mentioned the crown, and it went right completely over my head. Haha, crown head. It went completely over my head. I totally missed it. I had no idea what they were talking about at the time I read it, and I said something about it, and then 2 seconds after I read it, I'm like, oh, duh. It's the thing that the Doctor uses to control their minds, and it's right there. It's on the Joker's head. It's just one of those things. Sometimes the brain does some weird, silly things. But I'm looking at this book, I'm looking at Royals, and it's obvious right away what I'm seeing is not normal text boxes, not normal text bubbles. These aren't conversations. This isn't a normal, and this isn't a conversation in Korean either. It doesn't have the sort of the end brackets around it or whatever that often signify that somebody's speaking in a different language. And instead, these are thought bubbles. These guys are thinking and they're talking to each other. These guys are telepaths. And so I noticed that right away. And that's not something you necessarily notice. A hardcore comic book reader paying attention is going to notice something like that. Everybody else is just going to see text bubbles, and they're going to think they're talking to each other until they get to the point where it's obvious that they are telepaths, and then, oh, okay. But no, it stuck out to me immediately, and so I don't miss those things, and I didn't miss this either. The name of one of the brothers is Castor, and then a couple of pages later, they mention that the other brother, his name is Paul. He's having a conversation with a priest that they ran into on the flight to Seoul, and he runs into him again out there on the street. And he mentions that his name is Paul, and I immediately was, oh, well, then it's Castor and Pollux. Paul is short for Pollux. And then, of course, another page or so later, that's what they say. Yes, it's Castor and Pollux. And Castor and Pollux are the Greek and Roman. They mention Greek in the book, but they're also Roman. The twins, and they have an interesting story. It's interesting to see where this is going, because Paul is in here talking about sort of having nightmares of his brother being the death of him, and that's actually kind of backwards from the history. If you know anything about Castor and Pollux, they're twins from different fathers, and Castor is the son of a normal man, a prince or a king, somebody like that. I don't remember off the top of my head. Maybe I'm not sure off the top of my head. But Pollux is the son of a Greek god, a Zeus. And I think Zeus appears as a swan or something like that to seduce the mother. And they're actually born of eggs, and it's 4 of them, and Athena is their sister. And there's a whole bunch of story there with the Greek and Roman mythology. And of course, Castor and Pollux themselves are in a couple of different stories throughout those histories. And the main idea is that they end up running into a couple other twins along their way, and these guys, they're not necessarily great guys. They get into a little bit of trouble. They have adventures and they do great things. They're part of the Argonauts, Jason and the Argonauts, and they go after the Golden Fleece, and so they have all these adventures. But they also do some other things that are not necessarily really great. And one of the things is they try to rob this bread company, and they do it with this other set of twins, and the other set of twins betrays them, and ultimately that ends to their doom. Castor kills one of the twins. The other twin ultimately kills Castor, and then Pollux kills the other brother twin, and then so all of them are dead except for Pollux, and of course that makes sense because he's the son of an immortal god. And I guess just to finish the story, they're a constellation in the sky as well. well, Castor and Pollux. And the reason they're in the sky is because Pollux missed Castor so much that he goes to Zeus and he asks the gods, can I give my brother half of my immortality? And they say, well, we'll do you one better. We'll give you both immortality. Now you're both stars. And so there you go. Now you're caught up on the history of that. But this Royals book, so it obviously sets up these two characters, and it sets them up really well. And if you look at them, they are brothers, but they look different. They are actually different. Who knows? Maybe it's the actual immortals themselves. They're poker cheats in the story, and they're about to make a huge mistake and take on a gangster. He's a sort of casino-owning gangster type, and it could end up real bad for him. It's a great little setup and story. I'm looking forward to reading the rest of it as the books come out, and I'm not always necessarily wanting to do that. I'm not always necessarily, oh, that was a good read, but I don't necessarily particularly care about the story or the characters or whatever. But this is one of those ones that I'm thinking I'm picking up the next few issues, and I'm hoping to see where it goes from there. You can get a copy of it now. It'll be Wednesday. It comes out Wednesday. You can get one at your LCS. If you don't have one of those, you can hit me up at Amazing Fantasies. If you're ever in Topeka, Kansas, stop by the store sometime and say hi.